He didn't want the throne. He hated the city. And yet, he became the most powerful man on earth. To understand Tiberius, we must first look at the man who built the stage he was forced to stand upon, Augustus. Tiberius was a creature of the camp, a soldier who found more comfort in a cold tent than a heated palace. From the Rhine to the Danube, his legion secured the borders of an empire that was still finding its footing. But in Rome, he was merely a tool for the dynasty. His happiness was a secondary concern to the emperor. The first strike against his soul was the forced divorce from Vipsania, the only woman he ever truly loved. The law of Augustus was absolute. To secure the bloodline, Tiberius was wed to Julia, a woman he despised. Suffocated by the politics of Rome, he eventually fled into a self-imposed exile on the island of Rhodes. He wanted to be forgotten. But fate, and his mother Livia, had other plans. One by one, the other heirs died. Some say it was luck. Others whispered of poison. Regardless, Tiberius was the last man standing. In AD 4, a reluctant Augustus finally placed his hand on Tiberius's shoulder. He was adopted as the official heir. For the next 10 years, he worked tirelessly, suppressed revolts, and waited. He wasn't a king yet, but he was the empire's only hope. In August, AD 14, the divine Augustus breathed his last. His final words. "Have I played my part well?" The transition was not smooth. Tiberius hesitated in front of the Senate, feigning, or perhaps feeling, unworthiness. But the dice were cast. The soldier was now a Caesar. And Rome would soon learn that a tired man is a dangerous man. At 55, Tiberius was a man of the past, more comfortable with logistical reports than political theatrics. He tried to play the role of the humble citizen, refusing grand titles, but his humility felt like a threat to the Senate. Rome missed the warmth of Augustus. In Tiberius, they saw only a shadow that refused to speak. Then came Germanicus, the golden boy of Rome, the nephew Tiberius was forced to adopt. In the forests of the north, he won victories that Tiberius had only dreamed of. The legions didn't just follow him, they worshipped him. From his palace, Tiberius watched. Was it jealousy? Or the cold calculation of a man who knew how easily a hero becomes a rebel? In AD 19, Germanicus was sent to the east. Within months, the hero of Rome was dying. With his final breath, he accused the governor Piso, a man handpicked by Tiberius, of poisoning his wine. The news hit Rome like a physical blow. The people didn't just weep, they screamed for justice. Tiberius remained stoic, almost robotic. To the public, his lack of visible grief was a confession of guilt. Piso, fearing he would be the scapegoat, took his own life before a verdict could be reached. From that moment, the trust between the emperor and his people was severed. Tiberius began to see enemies in every corner. And in the shadows of this paranoia, a new figure emerged. Lucius Aelius Sejanus, the head of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus became the only man Tiberius trusted. He was the emperor's eyes and ears. His protector. And his poison. The era of the treason trials was beginning. Rome was no longer a city of light, but a city of fear. Sejanus realized that fear was a more effective tool than loyalty. He began to weaponize the law. The treason trials, or maestas, turned the Senate into a slaughterhouse of reputations and lives. Tiberius watched from his throne, his silence interpreted not as hesitation, but as cold approval. Informers, the delators, haunted the city, trading the lives of their neighbors for a piece of their wealth. Sejanus's next move was brilliant and terrifying. He convinced the emperor to bring the guard inside the city. The Castra Praetoria was built. For the first time, Rome lived under the constant shadow of 9,000 elite blades. The Praetorian Guard was no longer the emperor's shield. It had become Sejanus's private army. Inside the palace, Tiberius was smothered by his mother, Livia. She never let him forget she was the reason he wore the purple. His own son, Drusus, was a man of violence and wine, a disappointment that Tiberius could barely stand to look at. Sejanus saw a path to the throne. He seduced Drusus's wife, Livilla, turning a family's heart into a nest of vipers. In AD 23, Drusus died suddenly. Poison was suspected, but in the chaos of Rome, the truth was buried with him. Tiberius showed no grief. To the Senate, his lack of tears for his own son was the final proof of his inhumanity. He was the last of his line. The soldier had won every battle on the frontier, but he had lost his family in the capital. With the heir gone, Sejanus stood at the foot of the throne, his shadow lengthening over the entire empire. Tiberius was done. He hated Rome, and Rome hated him. It was time to leave the city to the wolves. In AD 26, Tiberius did the unthinkable. He walked away from the center of the world. He left the Senate, the temples, and the people of Rome behind. He would never see the city again. His destination was Capri, a jagged island fortress where the cliffs met the sea. For Tiberius, it was a sanctuary. For Rome, it was the beginning of a dark mystery. He built the Villa Jovis, a palace of isolation where he could brood in peace, far from the whispers of the Senate. In Rome, Sejanus was now the master. Every word the emperor sent passed through his hands first. He fed Tiberius a diet of lies, painting every rival as a traitor while he systematically cleared his own path. But one woman refused to be silenced, Agrippina the Elder, the widow of Germanicus. She was the living ghost of her husband, a constant reminder to Tiberius of the man the people actually wanted. Sejanus convinced the emperor that Agrippina and her sons were plotting a coup. The trap was set. She was arrested and exiled, her children scattered and imprisoned. The bloodline of Augustus was being systematically erased. Tiberius communicated with Rome via signal fires, a king who governed by flickering lights across the sea. Sejanus was now so powerful that people began to worship his statues as if he were the emperor himself. He was only one step away from the throne. All he needed was for Tiberius to never come back. But in the silence of Capri, the old soldier was finally beginning to wake up. The shadow was about to fight back. The silence of Capri was broken by a single letter from a woman Tiberius still trusted, Antonia Minor. The letter revealed the truth: Sejanus hadn't just protected the throne, he had poisoned it. Sejanus was now a consul, the highest office in Rome. He believed he was untouchable. Tiberius began his counterattack, not with legions, but with ink. He sent a flurry of confusing, contradictory letters. The emperor praised Sejanus one day and rebuked him the next. The hunter was becoming the prey. In the dead of night, a new player entered Rome. Macro, the man Tiberius had chosen to destroy Sejanus. Macro carried a secret commission. His mission, to flip the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard in a single night. October 18, AD 31. Sejanus was summoned to the Senate. He expected to be made a king. The Senate met at the Temple of Apollo. The air was thick with incense and unspoken fear. As he walked in, the senators crowded around him, hoping to be the first to congratulate the new co-emperor. But Macro was already at the door. The guards outside were no longer Sejanus's men. They were the emperor's. The session began. A long, rambling letter from Tiberius was read aloud. At first, it praised Sejanus. But then, the tone shifted. One accusation followed another. Sejanus's face drained of color. Suddenly, the senators who had been fawning over him just minutes ago pulled away, leaving him standing alone in the center of the hall. "Arrest him!" Macro's voice rang out. The shadow of the empire was finally being dragged into the light. Sejanus's fall was instantaneous. From the heights of the consulship to the depths of the Mamertine prison. The man who had ruled Rome was strangled. His body was thrown to the mob, who erased him from existence. But the final blow came from Sejanus's wife. She revealed the truth about the death of Tiberius's son, Drusus. His own daughter-in-law, Livilla, had been the killer. Tiberius's world collapsed into a void of total betrayal. The old general broke. He became the hermit king of Capri, a man who saw a traitor in every shadow. The purge that followed Sejanus's fall was even bloodier than his rise. No one associated with the traitor was spared. He became a ghost. He ruled an empire of millions from a room of silence and stone. Macro, the man who had brought Sejanus down, quickly stepped into the vacuum. He was the new master of the guard. By Tiberius's side was the last son of Germanicus, Gaius, the boy the soldiers called Caligula. He had survived the purge of his family by becoming as cold and hollow as Tiberius himself. Tiberius saw the boy's true nature. He knew he was leaving the empire to a monster. "I am nursing a viper for the Roman people," he remarked. It was his final act of cynicism. In Rome, the stories of what happened on Capri grew wilder and more terrifying every day. The man who had once secured the Rhine and the Danube couldn't even control the shaking of his own hands. He had spent 23 years trying to be the man Augustus wanted. He had failed. In AD 37, Tiberius made one last attempt to return to Rome. But as the city rose from the horizon, he froze. A sudden panic seized him. He ordered the fleet to turn back. He was a king who could no longer face his kingdom. He stopped at Misenum. The journey was over. The old soldier had no more strength to flee. Macro and Caligula watched him like vultures. They were the new masters of Rome, waiting for the old one to die. Tiberius knew. Even in his delirium, he understood that he was leaving the world to men worse than himself. He looked at Caligula and whispered his final curse. He was nursing a viper, and he was glad. On March 16, the emperor stopped breathing. The news spread through the villa like wildfire. Caligula was proclaimed emperor. The courtiers cheered, the wine flowed. The nightmare was finally over.
Help me! Does no one hear me?
The dead emperor was sitting up. He was asking for his signet ring. He was asking for food. Caligula was paralyzed. He was already wearing the ring. He had already accepted the throne. If Tiberius lived, Caligula died. Macro did not hesitate. He knew there was only one way out for both of them. He entered the room. Without a word, he took the heavy bedclothes and pressed them down. The struggle was brief. The second emperor of Rome was smothered by his own. Tiberius was gone. But as the sun rose over Misenum, Rome didn't know that the real nightmare was just beginning. The news reached Rome like a thunderclap. The city didn't mourn, it sighed. Tiberius to the Tiber, they chanted. They wanted his body thrown into the river like a common criminal. Caligula led the procession, carrying the ashes of the man he had helped kill. To the world, he was a savior. He was the son of Germanicus, the shining star that would bring Rome back from the darkness. He publicly burned Tiberius's secret files, promising an end to the era of informants and fear. But Caligula had spent his youth on Capri. He hadn't just watched Tiberius, he had studied him. Macro remained his shadow, the man who knew where the bodies were buried because he had buried them. Tiberius left behind a legacy that few appreciated, a treasury bursting with gold, the result of decades of fiscal discipline. A fortune that Caligula would spend in less than a year on spectacles, palaces, and madness. In the end, Tiberius was a man of the frontier, a soldier who had spent his life holding back the chaos at the edges of the world. He was never the second Augustus. He was the man who had to make the empire work after the dream had died. His name became a synonym for tyranny, but history is often written by those who didn't have to carry the weight of the crown. Tiberius Claudius Nero. A reluctant heir, a brilliant general, and a broken man. He saved the empire, even as it cost him his soul. The shadow of Augustus had finally faded into the light of history. While Rome whispered of scandals, the provinces flourished. Tiberius was a master of the long game. He didn't seek glory through blood. He used diplomacy to keep the Parthian kings at bay without losing a single legionary. Under his watch, the infrastructure of the empire was fortified. Roads, bridges, and aqueducts stood as silent monuments to his efficiency. But by ruling from Capri, he broke the heart of Roman politics. The Senate became a ghost of its former self. He turned the Principate into a machine. The man holding the wheel didn't matter as much as the machine itself. And that machine was about to be handed to a man who wanted to drive it off a cliff. Caligula was the shadow's shadow. He had learned that an emperor could do anything, and no one would stop him. The 2.7 billion sesterces Tiberius had saved began to vanish. The discipline was gone. The chaos was back. History remembers Tiberius as a monster, but perhaps he was just the most honest man to ever wear the purple. He didn't want the crown. He didn't want the lies. He simply did what he was told until his soul was hollow. Today, his name is etched in stone, a symbol of the dark transition from republic to empire. He remains an enigma. A man who was too much of a soldier to be a politician, and too much of a human to be a god. Augustus built the dream. Tiberius managed the reality. And reality is rarely pretty. The cliffs of Capri still stand, silent witnesses to the man who fled the world to save himself, only to lose everything. Before the crown, before the paranoia, there was just a soldier. And perhaps, that is how he should be remembered. For 2,000 years, Tiberius was the beast of Capri, his name dragged through the mud of history. But archaeology and modern analysis tell a different story. One of stability and survival. His true monument wasn't built of marble, but of secure borders and a professional army. He was the man who did his duty until it cost him everything he loved. Power didn't just corrupt Tiberius. It isolated him. It made him the loneliest man in the world. He proved that the empire was no longer a person, but a position. A machine of absolute power. He was the shadow that allowed the Pax Romana to endure, even as it consumed his own soul. Today, the cliffs of Capri still stand as silent witnesses to his exile. Tiberius Claudius Nero. A man of iron who turned to stone. Thank you for watching this deep dive into Rome's most misunderstood emperor. Who was Tiberius to you? A hero or a villain? If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more epic histories from the ancient world. Next time, the rise of Caligula. The Viper has been released. Brought to you by Hathan. History is never just in the past. Rest in peace, Tiberius. The burden is finally over.